just like to request everyone to join us on stage for one quick moment so we can, in one sense, unveil this wonderful work for everyone. Would you just please take copy each? Nita, please join. Yes. So this is a phenomenal work by Dr. Sajitha Madathil that we at the Ashoka Center for Translation have just published in English translation with Penguin Random House India and with the support of Manju Deshbandhu Gupta Fellowship. And it's translated by the celebrated translator Jayashri Kaladil. So I'll just pause for a moment. Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nita. Yes, as you please. And thank you, Millie. So without further ado, I think let us get talking. I am Sanchit from the Ashoka Center for Translation, and it is our absolute pleasure and honor to be curating and moderating this session. I have three wonderful panelists with me. One, a performer, another, a poet, a third, a writer, and all of them have different engagements with translation and with different forms and genres of expressing oneself. Just one thing I want to highlight as far as the context of this session goes, when we titled this session Translation and the Making of Archives, we were not thinking of translation as practice or translation as theory. Of course, both of those things are important, and we can talk about them at length. We wanted, of course, to talk about very tangible products. So this book that we just unveiled in front of you, For the Love of Art, The Lost History of Women in Kerala Theatre by Dr. Madathil, is a part of a series of books, a series of works of non-fiction that we have been translating from various Indian languages and publishing in partnership with Penguin Random House India. If I could just quickly show you another book, for instance, I have with me in the same series a book called My Truth, which is the first autobiography ever written in the Gujarati language. And it could as well be one of the earliest autobiographies written in India. If you look at this book, you'll be surprised how the author does not know how to write an autobiography because the form is so new and the author is struggling with the idea of writing about oneself. So instead, a large section of this autobiography is written as if it's just a work of footnotes. Likewise, we have another book in the series. So this is as I said, this is the tangible archive I'm talking about, which is called A Glimpse of My Life. And this is the autobiography of the Indian revolutionary Ram Prasad Bismil, who finished this work three days before he's hanging. He was caught in the, in the infamous Kakori case by the British. He was jailed and he was hanged to death. And just 3 days before his hanging, he finished writing this work, which was smuggled out of the jail, was banned, and we have just published it in English translation with Penguin. Likewise, another book, and we have Professor Kamalakar Bhat with us, that we have published in this series is called Courtesy of Criticism, which has some of the finest essays from Kannada by this critic and scholar called Kirtinath Kurtakoti. And I'll just take one more minute of yours before I go to my panelists. Likewise, another act of curation or another act of making of archives that we are engaged in at the Center for Translation is a series called Women Translating Women. And tomorrow, in fact, there is going to be a session with the same title as well. So we have, for instance, I have with me one book from that series called Other Skies, Other Stories by Sara Rai, who's actually just sitting in the audience, and she will be speaking on the panel tomorrow, translated by Sara ji herself, along with Ira Pandey. Another book that I have with me is A New World Romance by diasporic Hindi writer Susham Bedi. And I want to mention her for one important reason, which is that it is this author's family that decided to support our idea of curating an archive of translation called Women Translating Women. So it is through the support of this author's family that we are publishing 12 books in English translation with Zuban Books. And of course, my panelist Krupa is one of our translators in the series, and she has done a wonderful book from Tamil called Unmoored by Ramachandran Usha. Okay, I've taken a lot of your time. I will quickly now turn to my panelists. Uh, Dr. Madathil, of course, I want to come to you first, not only because we are in Kerala and we've just unveiled your book. Uh, so my question, Dr. Madathil, to begin with, really is that you see this book, this work, The Lost History of Women in Kerala Theatre, as a history of your own life, your own practice, as an academic, as an artist, as an author. So I just want to understand from you, how did you come to situate not only the woman question in Kerala's theatre history, but also your own self in a larger tradition of women performers who, as you said, were sidelined, shunned, and silenced in the wider theatre sphere of Kerala. So, Dr. Madathil, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sanjit Toor, for the warm introduction and curating this inspiring section. Uh, for me, I started working in theatre from 1988 onwards. It's more like I was start working in street plays of Kerala Shastra Sahitya Pariyar. It's a science movement in Kerala. Then they start organizing women's street plays and women's workshops. That all influenced by the gender discussions of 1970s and 1980s. That actually fueled my feminism, and I thought, okay, let me study theater seriously. And I went to study theater at Calcutta. So what happened is, when I came back, I realized that our theater texts, our theater histories, there is no mention about women, actors, theater, mostly actresses. They are the only people working in theater at that time. So then I decided, okay, I have this feminist, background and all. Then I decided, okay, it's my time to, think about, I want my own history. That's the most important thing. Then I decided, okay, let I start interviewing people, digging up the archives. Then that end up with writing Malayalam Nadaka Stree Charitram in 2010. It took almost like 10 years for me. In different projects, I start working. So it's like that.
Thank you, Dr. Madathil. And to carry that strand of personal practice further to Professor Bhat. Professor Bhat, you have already always been, I mean, you were already translating other poets and critics, and you are both a poet and a critic yourself. So I would just want to understand, what are the intimacies powered by translation, via which you came to, again, not only join the League of Poets and Critics, writing in Kannada, but also translating between several languages. How did you come to locate yourself in that genealogy of poets and critics? So, how do you see your work?
Thank you, Sanchit, both for this question and this wonderful panel that you have put together and marshalling wonderfully. Yes, I am primarily a poet, and I began translating poetry much before I started translating criticism, much like the author Kirtinath Kurtkoti, whom I translated. Kirtinath Kurtkoti also was not a critic to begin with. He was a poet and a playwright. His first book, published book, in fact, was a play. And it was only accidentally that he was put in a place where he had to write a piece of criticism once, and then kind of he continued to do that more and more, and eventually he has come to be recognized as one of the most important literary critics of Canada. Now, my journey into criticism has this in common with Kurtzkoti, that I also began as a poet. And then I was translating poetry, Kannada poetry into English, a number of contemporary poets and some medieval poets. When I began to realize that, translating poetry in isolation, or a few poets in isolation, or even a cluster of poets, is not enough. I felt that what one really needs is the context within which these poets have to be put and understood. And that would be lacking because there weren't in English enough about the history of Kannada literature, or the evolution of Kannada literature and the traditions and the genres of Kannada literature and how they have evolved. That is precisely when, Ashoka also launched Chronicles, and I was fortunate that Ashoka accommodated and facilitated this particular translation project as well of Kirtinath Kurtkoti. I began with I began this journey of translating knowledge texts from Kannada to English. I think it's very important because what happens is that while the momentum, literary translation in India, both into English and into Indian languages, is very, very good, and that momentum, in fact, the kind of visibility it has made possible, the kind of notice it has and interest it has generated and created a new readership, that is very important. But yet at the same time, it is also important that we do not ignore knowledge texts. We may have fostered a kind of a hierarchy where we kind of give greater importance to literary text as original and something that is worth translating and something that is worth carrying across to other languages, whereas our knowledge text as derivative and secondary and not relevant to other languages. This kind of a notion we may have fostered, and I would like to challenge this assumption, and I feel very strongly that it is important that we also translate knowledge text from Indian languages, not only to English as well as into other languages. That's also the reason why I also translate from Marathi and Hindi into Kannada, not only from English into Kannada. Now, that is where my own practice of translation, in fact, is situated. I have, apart from translating Kirtinath Kurtkoti, who is one of the very few critics who gives you a kind of a comprehensive view of the entire spectrum of Kannada literature, the entire history of Kannada literature, who in fact who has through close reading, who has developed close reading as a historiography, and who has provided a glimpse into the evolution of Kannada literary traditions and the experiments that Kannada literature has done with forms and its engagement with modernity. And all this we can get a sense of through the works of Kirtinath Kurtkoti. And I think non-Kannada readers would greatly benefit in their readings of Kannada literature, greatly assisted in the readings of Kannada literature by reading Kirtinath Kurtkoti. It is in this context, I'll take just one more minute. It's in this context that I also have been translating other Kannada critics such as M.S. Asha Devi, who is a feminist critic and who gives a wonderful view of women's writing in Kannada as well as feminist thought in Kannada. As also the works of another marvelous researcher and cultural critic called Ramat Tarikere, who has created a rich archive of the intellectual and spiritual resources of various movements, social and intellectual movements in Canada, which emerge from diverse demographies, not only the mainstream but also the folk and the marginal communities, and from all their intellectual traditions and resources, he has created an archive of, and I am engaged in translating his works. Also, similarly, Kuvempu, K.V. Puttappa, who is widely recognized as a poet and a novelist, and his novels have been translated into English, but he's also a very important discursive writer in Canada who exhorted the youth to revolutionize themselves through rational thinking in 1950s and 1960s. So he's one of the writers who kind of launched the rationalist thinking in Canada. So these are some of the knowledge texts that I have been so far engaged in bringing into English, and I hope that these go to other languages. I'll conclude this by saying that I think it's important that these intellectual resources from Indian languages are available not only in English but also in other languages to each other, so that our own archive is wider than the narrow archive we end up consulting, either only of our language or what is available in English. I think it's in that context that an initiative like Chronicles is very, very timely and very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bhat. And I hope our audience is not thinking that we are congratulating ourselves a little too much by starting an initiative of this kind. But I want to thank you, Professor Bhat, and Dr. Madathil both together, because the word knowledge is in some ways central to the work that you both have done. Dr. Madathil realized that there was some knowledge that was missing, and she decided to, by pursuing her own life, her own practice, she decided to put that knowledge together in the form of this book. And you're also then talking about taking that knowledge further. And I could as well use the word knowledge and replace the word archive in the title of our panel to say translation and the making of knowledge. And really speaking, that is exactly how I want to think of the word archive here, not necessarily as a passive archive that we have to, sort of go to and, pick up some dusted documents. Instead, here we are talking about an active space of knowledge making that both of you, as an author, as a performer, or you, Professor Bhatt, as a poet and translator, are engaged in. And Krupa, I want to continue that same thread of thinking about knowledge and come to you. You are a writer, writing both fiction and non-fiction. Then you're a translator, translating fiction, but I assume non-fiction in some ways too. How do you sort of see your engagement in that case uh, as a writer engaged with these two different forms? One of which is often prioritized over the other, as Professor Bhatt was also hinting at it. I think we all know it's fiction that gets translated most of the times in India, especially when it goes from Indian languages to English, because it's easier to sell a story of some kind than it is easier to sort of market knowledge that is coming to us from another sphere. But how do you then see yourself and your practice, Krupa? Yeah.
Right. I think because, and we were talking about this earlier today with Sarah as well, who's here, because we are growing up in India and because we live in a country that is inherently multilingual, we're all always registering multiple languages, and we're sort of actively living a multilingual, sort of a translating world in which some of us speak some languages and some of us don't speak some languages. And so I think just in terms of negotiating your everyday life, you are, and for me, something that's very interesting about this novel that I translated, this is a Tamil novel that I translated from Tamil to English. The author's mother tongue is actually Kannada, and my mother tongue is actually Telugu. and we both actually speak Tamil more proficiently and write more proficiently than either of our mother tongues because we grew up in Chennai. And so, and we spoke to each other in Tamil the entire time that I was doing the translation. And so this is the kind of space that we are anyway in, which is anyway a part of our reality. And I think this is something that is being lost as well. And then I see, I meet kids these days, and I don't mean to be one of those aunties who says I meet kids these days, but there is a certain reluctance to master an Indian language today. It's seen as some kind of a class thing, and that there are schools that are sort of trying their best to erase mother tongues out of kids' mouths for some reason. And I think I was fortunate enough to have great language teachers growing up. And so this inherent love for Tamil alongside my love for English was always there. And I think there is this concept of state board and central board, right? And if you look at the state board syllabus of the South Indian languages, the quality of the regional language that you pick, your second language, the content you're reading is extremely high. At like your school level, you're already introduced to Sangam poetry, and you're reading extremely high level literary texts. And so in a way, I was already exposed to all of the without the bias or without some sort of a class system creeping into my system that, oh, one language is bigger than the other. And I think because of this ecosystem that sort of was already there, I was able to embrace both languages. And so when I had the opportunity as a writer, as I graduated from writing journalism pieces into non-fiction and fiction and things like that, I got requests from writers themselves to sort of translate their works. And I used to work for newspapers and magazines, and so I've translated an essay by this amazing Tamil writer called Stalin Rajangam on the ridiculing of this butler English. They say when you speak a half English sort of and this was spoken mostly by these people who were serving the British as their butlers, and because they were half Tamil and they sort of were borrowing all of these languages from their masters. When these people from the marginalized community spoke English, and it was this broken English that was made fun of as being butler English, and this would carry on into Tamil cinema as well. So that's one of the first essays that I translated. And this poet called Uma Devi, who also writes for movies now, and her work is something that I initially translated. And then eventually I came to this text, which when Rita Kotari at Ashoka asked me if I knew of a writer whose work would be interesting but hadn't been translated into English yet. I thought of a childhood neighbor auntie who I heard had moved to the Gulf and then become a writer. And I tracked her down and I found her novel, and I decided that I would write to her and then I would translate that book. And it turned out to be this incredible book about three women from Chennai who travel to the Gulf to make a living. Two of them are Muslim and one of them is Hindu, and they come back and they become friends when they come back, and they decide to make a life together. And it's just this beautiful book about friendship and about faith and about how actually faith across religions can bring people together because they have that inherent faith in common. And so that's what really moved me about Unmode.
Thank you, Krupa. And with faith, I think I could also add the word translation, how translation can bring people together. I mean, I'm speaking to one Tamilian, one Malayali, and one Kannadiga. I am a Hindian. I'm technically a Haryanvi speaker, but without translation, there's no way I would be sitting here conversing with all of you, or all of us being in conversation with each other. So thank you for that, Krupa. Dr. Madathil, if I could come back to you. Uh, uh, when you and I were speaking earlier, we were talking how in your work, both the words translation and archive come to have more expansive meanings because you're not working with a text. When you're translating histories, stories, as well as silences, expressions from the body, and in that sense, the source also of your work is the body, the embodied history is what you're in one way translating from the body of the artist into text as you wrote your book. And I was particularly moved by those little stories that you would include in this book. For instance, when you met, I think, the artist Kamalam, and you were recalling how she had grown very old and her memories of everything else were fading, but her memories of acting were actually very much alive even in her 70s. Or when another anecdote that you mentioned, that when you first brought up this question of writing a women's history of Kerala theatre in front of a male artist, you were sort of, shunned off. But you took that question to a female artist, and you say her eyes lit up with a spark, and she began to tell you her story. So if you could comment on that, please, and certainly on the kind of sources that you have consulted to write this book.
Look, when there was no clear method to write the theatre history, women's theatre history, the forgotten, I'm not very sure how to bring the forgotten stories. So what I have done is, I start reading, of course, the theatre histories, Malayalam theatre histories, and then to autobiographies, biographies of, all male directors and actors. Then I was actually trying to pick up the names of female artists they are, occasionally talking about. They are not purposefully doing it. They are just showing when they went there, when that lady was with me, like that. So I have started writing down all the names, they included in their biography unknowingly. They are not purposefully doing it. So then I start talking to them, and I realize that most of them are not in a situation to talk, or they are not alive. But whoever is there, I try to talk to them. Then I try to find out some archival material like photographs, notice, theater notice and all. So that all I collected. Then one more question in my mind all the time, they always tell me the stories. So one of my teacher told me, Sajitha, these kind of stories won't be a theater history, you know. So I realized that, okay, in my theater history, there is no one particular method to write the chapters. So each chapter have different methodology. You understand? So some of them are based on interviews. Some of them are analyzing the theater text. Some of them are talking about the, theater history. So I try to knit the history in that way.
Is there any particular interview or conversation you would like to talk about?
Yeah, I really want to read one particular conversation. There's a lady called Sita Lakshmi. She was working in theatre from her childhood. She's very active in theatre. Then later, when Malayalam cinema started happening from 1928, she acted in a third Malayalam movie called Jnanambika. Her name is Sita Lakshmi. So she was very active. She was working in movies. One movie she acted, but she was there almost like in Madras. She was there for 6 months to act one particular movie. It was like that in the studio and all. Then when she came back, she was very proud. She was told me that, I was very proud. I have a feeling that, okay, I am now a proper actress working in theater and movies. When she came back, her mother told her, my mother, who felt like I should not spend my whole life acting in plays and films, persuaded me to get married. I was 25 years old then, so I agreed to get married. The groom was Kochumukkuthil Ramankutti, a wealthy man from Ettumanur. The wedding took place straight away. I did not expect my life of acting would come to an end with my marriage. Unfortunately, my husband did not approve of my job because of the belief that women who act in plays will go astray. Whenever I asked him if I could continue acting, he would reply unenthusiastically, "You can go if you want to." Since it was not wholehearted response, I never felt like going either. I lived in a society that taught me that that all married women who should love and respect their husbands as if they are gods. Thus, concluded my acting career and my life receded to focus on my children and family. So, the interesting part is, uh, after I concluded my interview with her, she asked me, she was 90 at that time, very old. She can't even able to walk properly. She asked me, if there is any chance, please let me know. So I want to bring this love of art into my book. But in the beginning, as the so-called theater historians told me, this is not the proper, theater history. So I thought, okay, this is fine. I want to include their, I want to narrate the history through their story. That's what I have done. And for me also, this is the, I'm not doing this work as a, for the livelihood. And these ladies always, in the beginning, when I ask actors and directors, please tell me who is the best actress at that time, they said, all these ladies comes to work for money. They want money, So they want to, from a poor families. So that's why, they never say, from their word, women told me, no, we are there for the work, of course. But we love this art. We want to perform in front of everybody. We want this creativity space. So I want to, rewrite the history in their perspective. That's what I try to do. And I must say that, Jayashree, when I'm reading this, I never feel like, I am not reading Malayalam. Jayashree has written it like, it's a Malayalam text for me. So beautifully she has written, because she knows the Kerala and Kerala history. That's another reason. And for her also, this is not the livelihood. For her and me, it's a love for our art, love for our work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madathil. And I think if I were to speak on behalf of Jayashree, I think this is her first non-fiction work, in fact. Yeah, she had previously only translated fiction from Malayalam, and she mentions in her introduction as well the many conversations she had with you to understand, but also the bit that whenever she would, when we approached her to pick a book from Malayalam for us for this series, she mentions that whoever she would approach for suggestions would keep mentioning your book, that this is one book that certainly must be translated into English. And thank you also, Dr. Madathil, for talking about the word love, because I was talking with everyone earlier, and I think I wanted us to find these keywords with which to not only think about your individual works, but also to think about the larger ecosystem of translation. And I think for the love of art is certainly one perfect phrase to say our thanks to the art of translation and to translators who do that work. So thank you, Dr. Madathil. Professor Bhat, if I could continue this conversation again of a particular keyword, and the keyword I'm thinking of is courtesy, which is there in the title of your book. It's called Courtesy of Criticism, which, if I recall correctly, is the title of one of the essays. criticism is usually not seen as a very courteous work, one sees it as work in which perhaps you bring the other person down, if not figuratively, but certainly by way of argumentation. If you could talk about the word courtesy, perhaps, thinking about whether there is some courtesy to criticism and whether there is some courtesy to translation as well, if not faithfulness, but is there a courtesy to translation? And maybe for a bit, talk about the various hats that you put on while you were working on this book, because this is not a work that existed in original Kannada in one place. You began by actually curating this archive for us, which is now available in this book, and as a result, introducing Kurtakoti into the archive of the wider Indian literary tradition, wider Indian literary history. Over to you, Professor Bhat.
Yeah. Sanchit, one of the implications of Kurtskoti's notion of courtesy of criticism is what it should facilitate, what criticism should enable. He, of course, was very, very clear that criticism is not something that comes before literature, and literature, it comes after literature. But much more than that, I think he was also implying by the word vimarsheya vinaya, the word that I have translated from some people's perspective controversially as courtesy, as some kind of a responsibility as well. Now, when I look back at this journey of translating, from Kannada to English, as well as from Hindi and Marathi into Kannada, one of the things that has I have also I have also felt is this, that when we translate, most of our translation projects happen in a rather random and amateur manner, I should say. And I don't mean to demean, of course, translators do. There are very fine translators putting a lot of efforts and with great commitment, producing in translation very, very expert texts, as Jayashree Kalathil, you already mentioned, and a number of others. But I think translation should, now it is time that translation should become projects, because we don't have very well planned, translation projects where, a text, rather than an isolated text being a random isolated text based on whatever perception of quality or importance is translated. Take, for example, Banu Mushtaq's Heart of Lamp. When we read Banu Mushtaq Heart of Lamp, when it travels to, say, Malayalam from English or even from Kannada, what becomes available to the Malayalam readers is only those 12 stories that Heart of Lamp contains, or if one translates a few more stories from Kannada, those stories in isolation. But Banu Mushtaq is a product of an environment, and those stories come from a very, very particular historical juncture and also an evolution of the Kannada literary traditions itself. As now it has become somewhat known that Banu Mushtaq belongs to a Kannada literary movement called as Bandaya movement, but there's very little information about that available either in English, not more than journalistic piece of information, or in any other Indian languages. So, for example, if somebody wants to do some research on Banu Mushtaq or write something very, very serious about her, a serious piece on her work, there is nothing beyond the text to go for. So, very shortly, let me put it this way, that I feel that translation should now move towards a much more collaborative and teamwork, where we identify what are the gaps and discontinuities that need to be filled? What are the archives that we need to create in other languages so that, rather than individual authors or rather than individual texts, an entire milieu of writings along with the discursive text, whether literary criticism, the philosophical reflections, editorials, conversations, manifestos, all such materials also, I think, need to, be translated, for which, again, institutional support will be required, where including training. Because very often we translate from a genre into another genre without realizing the significance of the genre in its original language, nor having a very clear sense of what kind of a genre system into which we are translating. So if one is translating from, say, for example, medieval Malayalam or medieval Kannada, we are translating a entirely different genre into what may be called as modern poetry, which is not at all, Kabir, for example. So these are things, as Linda has very famously has discussed, the movement is from song to text, and what are the problems that it consists of. So I think we need to make efforts at taking a lot of paratext and discursive, text along with that, for which we need a more planned translation projects.
Thank you, Professor Bhat. And in some ways, you continue the conversation we were having with Dr. Madathil, that the kind of archive she's dealing with, paratext exists not just there, but even when we are dealing with written text, I mean, texts don't come to us by themselves, they instead do come to us mediated by particular histories, particular channels, both old and new. With that, Krupa, I want to come to you with the last question, and then we can open it up to the audience. You, of course, mentioned Usha as this neighborhood auntie whom you grew up with. I've also, of course, been thinking, and I told you earlier, that the city of Chennai features again and again in your work, in both your fiction work, in your translation work, as well as in your non-fiction work, particularly your book, Rivers Remember, which was written in the aftermath of the devastating Chennai floods. And I want to ask you perhaps about your practice with the city of Chennai sort of being there in background at all times as this ever-accessible archive from which you keep drawing some or other specific story, small or big, and you keep taking it into English via the form of a non-fiction book or via the form of a story. How do you place that city of Chennai in your work, then placing yourself in the city of Chennai? Yeah.
Right. So in my first novel, What We Know About Her, there's a scene in which this character asks the protagonist if she's lived in the city all her life, and it irritates her a lot because she thinks of it as shorthand for, oh, you've never left home, have you? You don't know the world. You've never seen a world outside of this small city that you call your home. And she can read all of this subtext in, oh, you've lived in Chennai all your life, as a sort of, and this is something that I do live with as somebody, and which is sort of probably why it came into my fiction as well. And but I do think that now I've sort of made obviously peace with it, and I sort of turn it into an advantage, because if I am now the Chennai girl on most panels. If they want to know something about the city, about its disaster management planning, about who's the new writer that needs to be translated, people do call me. And so I feel like it's one of those things of, but also, I mean, one of my favorite writers is the Italian writer Domenico Starnone, who sets almost all of his work in Naples, and as does Ferrante. And so I feel like when I read Starnone's work, for instance, I feel like I know Naples very intimately, as if I'm walking the streets of the. I did visit Naples some time ago, and I felt like I could hear the voices from his book, and I do draw inspiration from writers who are able to take us to a particular place, and I think I don't even think at this point that there will. I can't promise that I won't write any book that is not set in Chennai. That is probably, and we are in fact at the Center for Translation working on another book on Chennai, and that's also a translation project which involves many writers. And like you said, it's a project. We're pulling together something that doesn't exist, and we're sort of creating it with 10 different writers and 10 different translators. So that's also something that the center is doing. So yeah, Chennai is home.
Thank you, Krupa. Every single time you all mention the center, I feel embarrassment. Although I'm thankful to all of you. I think with that, we can come to the audience in case you have any questions. Please do. Oh, wow, great, great.
I'm indebted to Ashoka Center for bringing out these beautiful books. Also, as a very serious reader of prose and poetry. So I'd like to mention Aravind Krishna Mehrotraji's translation of Vinod Kumar Shuklaji's poetry, and then his own poetry of least concern, among other works. My question is to Kamalakar Bhat sir. So you've translated most of us writing in English or other Indian languages. So writing is translation is a form of literary activism, is it not? The second question is, among all this sea of translation, how do you find space for your own writing? Because you yourself are, a very well-known poet. And among your notable works of translation, last year you had translated this very important work, Shiva Prakash ji's volume of poems, In the Light of Shiva. So amongst all this, how do you find space for your own poetry, sir?
Well, I think I have discovered in the past 15 years that I have been translating poetry, primarily poetry, and only recently prose, that translation has been sustaining my creative work. Translation is no less a creative, and if at all, it has in fact enriched my own craft. It has enriched my own approach to how poetry can be imagined. I've learned from the innumerable poets from all around the world that I have translated into Kannada, and also from Kannada poets into English. So translation for me has been a very, very fruitful and productive creative activity. In fact, it is not so much finding time, it is, it goes together. When I'm translating, even when I'm doing my own writing work, and I'm writing my own poetry when I am translating. So I'm not really alternating between the two, doing my work sometime and this other times. Yes, I find translation a very, very fruitful way of, enriching and pushing my own writing further. Thank you for the question.
If I could take a moment to add to it, whenever I tell people that I work at a center for translation and they ask me what you're working on, I do none of my work, so I just want to be able to show these books as all of my work. But yes, second question, please. Yeah.
This is addressed to Krupa. My question is, being a polyglot, you are originally a Telugu, you translated a Kannadiga novel into Tamil. What are the boons of being a polyglot in translation? Whether there is involving any sibling rivalry? Between you. And next question to Sajitha. Sajitha Madathil, what about O.V. Vijayan? He translated his own work, Kazakh and Idihasam, into the Legends of Kazakh, the Saga of Kazakh. But it was entirely a random. It was entirely a random one. It was a casual. The very author who wrote Kazakh could not do justice to his translation, his own translation. It was a random. What is your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, there is no sibling rivalry in that sense, but I think one of the frustrations of being a translator is our inability to obviously translate dialect or a joke, or when something is extremely funny in the original and then you're trying to have to write a footnote or explain what the joke really is, or try to see.
There is that one joke about there being the same word for science and something
Yeah,
else.
so the character in the book uses the word poriyal, for which is basically a kind of toran, which is a vegetable that you eat, instead of poriyal, which is the word for engineering. And the character does not even realize that she has made this mistake, but the character who's listening it has heard it and is passing on the joke to the reader in the text. And so I had to sit with this joke for like a long time to just sort of understand, how do I do this. These kind of frustrations are there, but I think being multilingual allows you to appreciate uh, even the variances within your language, the language that you are working with, and its origins and stuff. So, I mean, that's pretty much it. Are you going to say anything?
No, as for that question, Professor Bhatt, if in fact you want to add a bit about translating your own writing, I mean, do you ever translate your own original work? Perhaps that would be a good comparison to look at.
Yeah. If I were to respond to the question that you have asked to her, you see, I also have translated my own work into English, apart from translating others, and others have translated my work into English. The difference between what others have translated into my work, what the other translators have translated into English, and what I have translated is precisely this, that it's a completely different text in English when I translate. Because as a writer, I take that freedom to do something different in English, because when you translate, what you're doing is to produce a new work of art. It's only a bilingual who always has this compulsion to compare the original with the translation, and then feel very, very sad that the magic of the original is not there in the translation. This is the problem that bilinguals have. And I am one of those who agree with the notion that translation is meant only for monolinguals.
Hi, my question is to Krupa. I would like to know, how do you catch the nuances of regional flavor when it comes to translation? And one more question I have seen many translations of Tamil, Malayalam, Bengali, Kannada, etc., etc. Why not Assamese? Why not other languages? Is it because publishers feel there is a lack of audience, or don't you lack of translating ability? What is the real what is that? You don't see much of translation in other languages apart from Tamil, Malayalam, Bengali, Kannada. I can see many translations into English, but I can't find in other languages.
Thank you. Yes, I'll just quickly add before Krupa answers. I'll market another book from the same series. We have published a book from Assamese. It's a biography of a leading figure in 19th century Assam, who in fact led the movement for the recognition of the Assamese language when Bengali was the language of law and language of power in Assam. So this is a book called Being Modern, the biography of Anandaram Dhekial Fukan by Gunabhiram Barwa. Check it out, please. But over to Krupa to answer briefly.
And also, Aruni Kashyap works quite a bit in translating from Assamese into English. So please do check out Aruni's work. Yeah, Indira Goswami as well. You wanted to know about translating dialects, which is a thing that happens in this book, in fact. And one of the interesting things about this novella, which I hope you will read in either languages, is that the character in the book observes the difference in the dialect. And so it gave me a hint there as to what I could do with this. Obviously, I can't express the dialect, and this is something that I think Arunav also spoke about in one of his, we can't really keep focusing on what is lost in translation, but we'll have to focus on everything else that we gain. And so there was there's a character who speaks in a Tirunelveli Tamil accent. And so this lady asks her, why do you speak Tamil like this, in fact, in the book? And she says, oh, that's because I am from here. And I felt like that's a place for me to draw attention to this. And so the author had left enough cues. And I think that also comes from the fact that the author is also registering multiple, the author is also aware of the fact that this is not something everybody hears all the time in Chennai. And so that she has found a smart way to place it inside the text. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Krupa. And with that, thank you, everyone. Thank you, all of you, for staying here listening. Thank you to our wonderful panelists, our authors, translators, as well as our supporters and publishers. Thank you so much, everyone.